We've become very good at naming diseases, but understanding why they develop is a different story. Fatigue gets blamed on sleep, brain fog gets blamed on age, digestive symptoms are assumed to begin in the gut. Then the thyroid acts up, your heart starts racing, another symptom, another diagnosis. Your joints hurt, your skin changes, and suddenly you've got 6 separate problems. But what are the odds your body broke in 6 completely unrelated places? Maybe it's time to pop the hood. Hi, I'm Valerie Robitaille, and I'm a functional health practitioner. And over the years, I've seen one pattern show up again and again. People almost never walk through the door with just one symptom. They come in exhausted. They can't think straight. They're anxious. They can't sleep. Their digestion is a mess. Their hormones are all over the place. Maybe their joints hurt or their skin has changed. And here's the interesting part. Those symptoms usually don't get talked about together. The fatigue goes in one box. The digestive problems go in another. The hormones get their own box. The headaches, the skin, the joints, everybody gets their own little file. Now, maybe that's exactly what's happening, or maybe we're looking at one body through 6 different windows, because biology doesn't work in separate boxes. Your immune system doesn't know where endocrinology ends and gastroenterology begins. Your mitochondria don't care what specialist you're seeing. And your nervous system doesn't check your appointment schedule before it starts talking to your gut. The body is one integrated system. And once you start looking at it that way, a lot of health problems begin to make a whole lot more sense. So imagine you're walking into your house, the lights are flickering, the air conditioner isn't working, half the outlets are dead, the garage door won't open. Would you assume 4 separate problems, or would you wonder if something happened to the electrical system? So why do we stop thinking that way the minute we're talking about the human body? We've got one body, but we act like the brain, the gut, the thyroid, the immune system, and all the hormones decided to have problems independently. So if your symptoms aren't completely independent and your body is one integrated system, what exactly is connecting everything? And this is where biology gets really interesting. No matter where symptoms show up, whether it's the brain, the gut, the thyroid, joints, skin, or your heart, many of them are influenced by the very same biological processes. Things like inflammation, oxidative stress, poor energy production inside the cell, changes in the nervous system, hormone signaling, blood sugar regulation, the health of the gut microbiome, and even how well nutrients are getting into your cells. Think of these as the body's operating systems. You don't see them and you don't feel them directly, but when they start drifting out of balance, different tissues begin responding in different ways. One person develops migraines, someone else develops digestive problems, another person struggles with fatigue, someone else notices anxiety or joint pain or brain fog. Different symptoms, but often remarkably similar biology underneath. And that's why this series isn't organized around diseases. It's organized around biology. Because once you understand the biology, you start seeing connections that were invisible before. And those connections often lead to better questions, which can lead to better answers. So, if so many chronic symptoms are influenced by the same biological processes, why doesn't everyone end up with the same disease? Because we're not all starting from the same place, but you knew that. Think about it. We all have different genetics, different diets, different stress levels, different environmental exposures, different nutrient stores, different gut microbiomes, and different life experiences. So when biology gets pushed out of balance, it doesn't show up the same way in everyone. One person's symptom is fatigue. Another person's thyroid begins struggling. Someone else notices migraines or anxiety or joint pain or skin problems. It's the same orchestra, but different instruments are playing out of tune. The biology may be remarkably similar, but the weakest part of the system is often the first place symptoms appear. And that's one reason symptoms can be so misleading. They're important, but they don't always tell where the problem started. They tell us where the body is asking for attention. So instead of asking, what disease does this person have? I ask what's happening inside their biology that could explain all of these symptoms. And that's a very different question. Because if someone comes in exhausted with brain fog and digestive problems, they're not sleeping well, they have joint pain, I don't assume they woke up one morning with 5 separate problems. I start wondering, what's driving all of this? Is inflammation playing a role? Is the body making enough cellular energy? Are nutrients actually getting where they need to go? How's the condition of the gut microbiome? Is the nervous system stuck in a chronic stress response? What about environmental exposures adding to the biological burden? Now, one question leads to another, and that's exactly what biology does. It keeps asking us to look deeper. Because once you understand how the body works, you're no longer chasing symptoms. You're trying to understand the processes that are creating them. So where do we begin? A diagnosis is often the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. It gives us a name for what's happening, but it doesn't always explain why it's happening. We begin by looking at the biology that's happening underneath the surface, because no matter what symptom brings someone through the door, their cells are all following the same biological rules. Every cell has to produce energy. Every cell has to communicate. Every cell has to protect itself from damage. Every cell depends on nutrients, and every cell responds to inflammation. Every cell has to adapt to whatever environment it's living in. And when those processes are working well, the body has an incredible ability to maintain balance. But when enough of them start drifting in the wrong direction, that's when symptoms begin to appear. Not all at once, not in the same order, and not in the same place. And that's why two people can have completely different symptoms and still have remarkably similar biology underneath. So instead of asking, what's the name of this disease, I like asking, which biological processes are struggling? Because that's the question the body can actually help us answer. This is what these presentations are about. We explore the biology one process at a time until the bigger picture starts coming into focus. So if the body is constantly working to maintain balance, what pushes it off course? Usually not just one thing. Think of biology like a bucket. Every challenge the body faces adds another drop. Poor sleep, chronic stress, a nutrient deficiency, an infection, environmental toxins, processed foods, a sedentary lifestyle, maybe even simply getting older. None of those things by themselves have to be catastrophic. Your body is remarkably resilient. It can compensate and adapt and recover. But eventually, the bucket starts getting full. And once it reaches a certain point, that's when symptoms begin to show up. Not because your body suddenly stopped working, but because it's been working overtime to keep you balanced, and it's running out of room to compensate. That's why symptoms often seem to appear out of nowhere. The truth is, the biology may have been changing quietly for months or even years before you ever noticed the first symptom. And that's one of the most fascinating things about biology. It's constantly adapting until one day it simply can't adapt quite enough anymore. By now, you may have noticed that we started by talking about symptoms, but with every question we asked, we moved a little farther away from the symptoms and a little closer to the biology. Instead of asking, what disease is this, we're beginning to ask, what biological processes are under the most stress? Because inflammation doesn't care what organ it's in. Mitochondria don't only belong to the brain. The nervous system doesn't stop at your neck. Hormones don't affect just one gland. And your immune system is communicating with all of them. Biology is constantly crossing the lines we've drawn between organs and medical specialties. Your body has always functioned as one integrated system. So now let's move from the big picture to one of the most important biological systems in the body, mitochondria. You may have heard them called the powerhouses of the cell, and that's true, but it's also a little misleading. They don't just make energy. They help determine how well nearly every cell in your body functions. Every thought you think, every heartbeat, every emotion, every muscle contraction, every immune response, every repair process requires energy. And that energy comes largely from your mitochondria. Now, imagine that energy production starts to decline. Not enough to shut the whole system down, but just enough that every cell has to work a little harder. You may notice fatigue or slower thinking. Maybe your muscles don't recover like they used to. Perhaps healing takes longer. Your body is still functioning, but it's doing so with a smaller energy budget. Here's what's happening. Mitochondria don't just produce energy. They're also involved in inflammation, antioxidant defenses, cell signaling, and even deciding when damaged cells should be repaired or removed. That's why mitochondrial health shows up in so many different conversations. Not because everything is a mitochondrial disease, but because every organ depends on energy. When the body's energy systems become less efficient, almost everything else becomes more difficult. Let's say your body suddenly had about 20% less energy available than it did a few years ago. Not enough that everything shuts down, just enough that every cell has to start making little compromises. Your brain might say, I could still do my job, but concentrating is going to take a little more effort. And your muscles might say, I could still get through the day, but don't expect me to recover as quickly. And your immune system might say, I can still protect you, but it's going to take me a little longer. And your liver, your hormones, your digestive system, they're all having the same conversation. Nobody has stopped working. They're just not working at full capacity anymore. That's what declining mitochondrial function can look like. It's not one dramatic symptom. It's 100 tiny compromises happening at the same time. And because every organ depends on energy, those compromises can show up almost anywhere. Now, here's the good news. Mitochondria aren't static. They're constantly responding to the environment you've created for them. The quality of your sleep, the food you eat, your level of physical activity, your stress, the toxins that you're exposed to. They're always adapting. And that's important because mitochondrial health isn't simply something you're born with. It's something that's changing every single day. Imagine you own a 100-year-old apartment building in Brooklyn. Every day, somebody has to fix a leaky faucet, paint a wall, replace a broken light, tighten a loose railing. That's normal maintenance. Now, imagine every apartment starts having little problems at the same time. A pipe bursts upstairs, the boiler starts acting up, the roof begins leaking, and suddenly the maintenance crew spends all day putting out little emergencies. They never get ahead. They just keep reacting. Well, that's what chronic inflammation is. Your body has repair crews, but when they're constantly responding to small problems, they have less time and fewer resources to do the maintenance that keeps everything running smoothly. And every repair job creates a little mess. Normally it's cleaned up, but when the jobs never stop, the debris begins to accumulate. That's oxidative stress. So after everything we've talked about, I'd like to leave you with one simple idea. The next time you hear someone say, I have brain fog, or I'm exhausted all the time, or my digestion is a mess, try not to immediately ask, what disease causes that? Instead, try asking, what's asking this person's biology to work harder than it can comfortably handle? That's a very different question because now you're starting to think about energy and inflammation and recovery, stress, nutrition, sleep, environmental influences, not because one of those has the answer, but because biology is rarely that simple. Your body doesn't read medical textbooks. It doesn't know where cardiology ends and endocrinology begins. It simply responds to what's happening inside it every second of every day. And the better we understand that biology, the better questions we can ask. When we began today, we started with symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, digestive problems, pain, poor sleep, hormonal changes, and it's natural to ask, what's wrong with me? But I hope you're leaving with a different question. Instead of asking, which symptom should I chase next? Ask, what is my biology trying to tell me? Because symptoms are often the visible part of a much larger story. A story about energy, about resilience, about repair and adaptation, and the remarkable ways your body has been working, often for years, to keep you functioning despite everything it's been dealing with. Your body is not your enemy. Most of the time, it's been doing its very best to protect you. The more biology we understand, the better equipped we are to support it. So thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you'll continue exploring your own biology. If you'd like to learn more, I've put together a free quiz that may help you begin connecting some of the dots we've talked about today.